Yo, it's Guido coming at you with a Tactics Talk. Welcome back, and we're going to do a little 1v1, mano a mano, with two of the heavyweights at tier 10 for mediums. Now, I think the E50 is probably the undisputed heavyweight in terms of just sheer size, weight, and armor, but these two are no slouch, and you can see that I've got the Object 430U, the Russian tier 10 medium with a ton of armor, and we are going to go 1v1 with the Chinese knockoff, the 121. Which one do you think is better? Which one do you... I think you're going to be a little bit surprised by the actual answer. Guido, it's clearly the Russian 430U. Okay, hold on. Hold on. Let's get through the 1v1 before we make that determination, and I'll let you know which one I think is the number one out of these two, mano a mano, 430U versus 121. Which one comes out on top? You're going to be a little bit surprised by some of the findings. I think you really are. But let me now know down below which one you like the best. Let's get started. We'll start with a quick overview of the 430U. As it says in game here, the 430U is a version of the 430 with a rear placement engine transmission compartment, allowed it to feature a transverse placement of the engine and two planetary transmissions. Technical solution allowed for extending the interior space. It was discontinued. It was supposed to replace the T-54, so this was just a planned tank. You can see that it is fairly typical of the Russian hover mediums, fairly low and flat with the saucer kind of turret going on, very rounded. It has a very low profile, decently angled front armor, although not quite as much as the T-62. What it lacks in angle, it will make up with in armor thickness. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but fairly typical. Carries a 122 millimeter gun on it. Take a quick look at the tech tree for the Russians. For the 430U, it comes off the 430, off of the T-44, T-43, 3485. A really nice line to go through. Absolutely all good tanks, to be quite honest. T-43 is maybe the stinker of the lot, and even it's not that bad. But you're going to have a good time in the 34, 3485, T-44, even the 430 up to the 430U. This line was fairly recently, within a couple years, redone by Wargaming. The 430U was added, and the 430 was dropped down to Tier 9. So we ended up with the U at Tier 10. It is a four-person crew. You can see it's got a commander, gunner, driver, and loader. And if you look at the commander, take a look at the skills. He is carrying the radio operator skills. So there you go, quick overview. Let's take a quick overview of the 121 Chinese tank. For the Chinese version, which is very similar to the 430U and does fill a similar role in the game, development of a new tank based off the Type 59 started in 1962 with better firepower. Technical innovations were applied. The development of the Type 69 tank, some of these things were incorporated into it. Oh my goodness, all the prototypes were destroyed during Chinese nuclear weapon testing. Alrighty then. It looks a lot like the Russian hover mediums, but it is a larger tank. We'll take a look at the actual size comparison when we get to tanks.gg, but it is taller, it's a little bit wider, it has a bit more of a billboard side, and the armor layout is a little different, although it does have decent angling on the front right here. There's something important about the sides. Also, the armor thickness is a little less. We'll take a look at that when we get into the comparisons. It also carries a 122 millimeter gun. In fact, based on the designation of the gun, it seems like it's a very similar gun, if not a knockoff or a copy of the Russian 122 that's on the 430U. And we'll look at the gun stats. They end up being really pretty close between the two. For the tech tree, same thing, commander, gunner, driver, loader. It comes up the Chinese medium line from 34-1, 34-2. The 34 and the Type 58 are both quite good. The 34-1, 34-2 have mixed, shall we say, histories. They were recently buffed. They're not the greatest. The WZ-120, however, is a sleeper at Tier 9. I quite like it, and you end up at the 121. I know everyone's freaking out right now. They're like, Guido, you can't even compare the 121 to the 430U. Just stick with me, my friends. Stick with me. Well, what about that comparison? Let's take a look at this. Got both tanks in here, 100% crews, no buffs, no equipment, no personal reserve directives, any of that kind of thing. Just the baseline tank with 100%. crew. If we look at this, the 121 sure has a lot of green numbers over here, doesn't it? 440 alpha on both tanks, 262 pen standard. That's better than the 430U. Faster rate of fire, loads faster. Gun traverse is better. Depression and elevation is the same. Aiming time is a little bit worse. Dispersion is better by 0.04, and DPM is better by 168, with hit points at 2,050. Overall, the 121 has better firepower. Okay, does that make it a better tank? Well, the rest of the story, of course, with the 430U is this armor profile with 160 on the hull with angle and 300 on the turret in the front, whereas the 121's rolling with 135 and 240. 135 and 240 is no slouch for a tier 10 medium tank, especially with the angle on the hull that the 121 has. However, it is not in the same ballpark as the 430U's 160 and the 300. We're going to talk a little bit about some other parts of the profile that make the 430U so good armor-wise as well in just a moment. And we'll also discuss why that armor profile is so important for the 430U's performance. However, let's roll into the mobility, because one thing about the 121 is it is just plain old faster at 56 with 20 in reverse, with a 16.67 specific power and a 52 traverse, although the 430U has a little bit better at 54, makes the 121 a very comfortable medium to drive, whereas the 430 can feel a little bit sluggish at tier 10, but you're carrying around a bunch more weight and armor, aren't you? So we've got a tank with a little bit better gun and firepower, much more mobile, with a worse armor profile against a tank that has a pretty close firepower, especially considering the DPM, pretty close maneuverability, but a bunch more armor right there. Concealment is relatively similar, and they both roll with a 400 view range. Now, I don't think either one comes out on top with that comparison, and you might have been a little bit surprised at how close those two tanks really are, but I think some of you are starting to see the story that's developing here. There's just something about the armor on the 430U that lets it stick around mid to late game. We'll get to more of that in just a moment. Let's take a look at tanks.gg just for a little bit here. You see I've got the 430U called up. Look at that turret, just absolutely beautiful. So hard to pin except for the very highest TD number 2 pressing going on. A couple of weak spots on the little nodules on the cupolas, but they're still fairly strong even at 230, 240. And then, of course, the hull is really nice at 247 for a medium, even 194 on the lower plate. You put any kind of angling on it, now we get into these very thick and auto bounce kind of regimes. Remember how I talked about the 121 is just bigger? Take a look at that profile. We'll swap to the 121. It just gets taller right there. The turret is nice at 240. And it's round, which is nice. It also has the weak spots on the top, very similar to the 430U, but the hull is quite a bit less. Doesn't take near as much to pen that. And of course the turret is as well. The difference between the 240, 260 regime and the 300 is quite a bit. 300 is actually incredibly reliable against a lot of even tier 10s, whereas the 121's turret is not as reliable against tier 10s, especially when you start dabbing 2, and even some of the tier 9s when they start to dab. Still, it's a fairly low profile tank. The armor profile is very similar to the 430. It's just not quite as good. Whereas a 430, you poke out with the turret, you have a pretty good expectation to not take any damage, provided they don't hit a weak spot or get you looking a little sideways. The 121 is more of a dice roll. It's strong. It is, on occasion, sometimes reliable, but it's not nearly as nice as that monstrous 430U. And that really is important in the way the game is played. Talk about that a little bit later. Go through my setup and my stats real quick. Just take a look at how I've done and what I've got set up. I'm running a vert stab, a rammer, and optics. I'm playing the optics game. I have the same setup as far as equipment for these two tanks because I've been playing them a little bit lately to work on this video for you guys. I'm carrying 10 heat. That is the That is the gold round for both of these tanks. And interestingly, they both have the same penetration with their gold round of 340, very slightly different shell velocities. The heat rounds tend to be slower than other rounds. So 920 is not great as far as velocity goes, and the 121 is very similar. So like I said, 37 AP. I've got a little bit of HE in there. It is a 122, so it's decent with the HE. I'm running large kits, large fire extinguisher, and I'm not running any directives or food or any other try-hard things. I will say that with the relative derpiness of these two guns, it is nice to run some food and bring that down. As this tank is sitting, it's only 0.38 dispersion, and because I'm not running vents, which is one of the pieces of equipment arguably you should have on this tank, I could have quite a bit better dispersion by running food and vents. If I was running vents, I would probably drop the optics and swap these things out. But vents, optics, rammer, and vert stab are all definite players on both of these tanks. So this is how I've got this one set up, the 430U giving me 3,000 DPM. If we pop over to the 121, I'm sitting at 3,259 DPM with the same setup on equipment, a few less heat rounds, with 6, 28.6, and 6 HE rounds on that one. And then I've got large equipment and an automatic fire extinguisher. There's no particular reason why I'm not carrying 10 rounds. In fact, now that I look at it, I'm probably going to go in and give myself another 4 heat rounds and drop some of the HE off of the 121 right there. But that is my setup. Take a quick look then at the stats. If we look at the 430U, we look at the armor use efficiency of 0.59. Anytime you're about 0.5 or above, the armor becomes situationally effective. If you're near 1.0, it's effective all around. This is a lot to do with the turret and the surprisingly strong hull, which can surprise people if you're being careful with it. 2,700 DPM in the thing, and I'm running a 50% win rate, but I've only got 32 battles with just under 1,000 experience. I'm just starting to get the hang of the 430U because it has kind of an interesting play style. Another thing we'll talk about in just a moment. If we go back over then to the 121, take a look at my statistics and that. I have quite a few more battles, 114 into 54% win rate, a lower average XP. This is a tier 10 I've had for a very long time. It's been a while since I played it too much, so some of these games are from when I was considerably less good. But the armor use efficiency at 0.32, again, this is approaching situationally good. That's what I was discussing earlier. The turret's nice, the armor's nice, but it's not quite where you would love to have it like the 430U. So you end up seeing an armor use efficiency of 0.32 instead of near 0.5, and I'm only averaging 2,132. As of right now, a little bit better win rate, but these are both low sample sizes. I just find these two tanks to play very, very similarly, but one of them has a slight advantage, which I've probably already touched on a little bit. Again, we'll get to it when I wrap this thing up on my opinion on which is better, but one of them has a slight advantage despite the advantages of the other one that kind of puts it above at tier 10. Let's take a look at some gameplay. First example game, we're going to go with the 121 tier 10. We are top tier here on Himmelsensk, spawning to the south in an encounter battle. So I'm going to give you 2 battles. They're not fantastically epic 8,000 damage games, but I think they illustrate pretty well the playstyles of these two tanks, which are similar but have some slight differences in things you might want to try or do with them, or at least things that they can do. Like I said, this is a more maneuverable tank of the two, so it gets around. This happens to be a fairly small map, so it's relatively easy for mediums to get around on this map, but we're going to show the mobility of this thing getting around where it needs to be. Now, I like to win the field on encounter first and then get over to the town, but it kind of depends on what your team does. Notice my 277 is going straight over towards the cap. That drives me crazy. And then I'm seeing their 50B, their E75, their T54, a lot of heavy hitters, and I don't have a lot of guys hanging out here with me. So I'm going to try to force the situation a little bit, and it's going to get me caught out. Now, this is the armor on the 121, which is not nearly as good as the 430U. Of course, in E75 looking at you, probably going to nail you almost no matter what. So I get a shot on him. That surprises him. He doesn't know I'm there. Now he does, so he's certainly looking my way. I get a bit of free damage. I'm thinking, okay, that's a good start. I do have a few guys in the back, but they're way in the corner, way in the back. We lose our arty. This guy's looking at me. and slaps one for 553. The AMX50B shows up, takes another 2 shots. Thank goodness he didn't have the rest of his clip, and it is time to get out of here. I thought about going after him while he, excuse me, while I was reloading, but there's too many guys out in the field, like the Leopard, the FV, the aforementioned T54. Let's use the mobility of the 121 and survive this thing, right? Not great trades, bit of an advantage to begin with, stayed too long, and the 50B came in and punished me. A little bit of luck that the 50B didn't have his 2 shells, but he was in the middle of fighting too, and I am out of there. And I feel bad about leaving the guys there in the corner, but all of my power that I have left is here in the town. The 705, the 277, T32, Pantera, yada yada. So let's go over here. Our best chance of winning now is to clean up the town and then turn back around and deal with what might still be out in the field. If they had pushed hard on our tanks as soon as they saw me run, this game would have been ending up much, much different. Even as it is, we have a disadvantage now. Not a disadvantage in hit points, which is interesting, but a disadvantage in tanks. So we'll come back around this way, trying to find a way to get to the 257. Most of our tanks are now clumped together. Not always a great thing, but notice the mobility. I've driven all the way across the map, and it hasn't taken me a whole lot of time to do so. I'm cruising around at 52, 54 kilometers an hour, just moving around. GW Tiger P gets lit. Then the 155 does. We'll come in here and let's start breaking down the guys on this side of the map. You can see that some of them actually come back the other way. I'm going to chase the artillery around a little bit. Probably somewhat of a waste of time, but I really don't want them driving up behind people and derping them. So we'll just come around here and get rid of this guy. I needed a ram kill for the mission. Sometimes you have those missions that force you to do silly things. That was one of those silly things. I probably should have shot him and moved on much quicker, but I thought, ooh, I need a ram. And not only did I not get the ram, I wasted time. So mobility again, moving along, getting back towards the hit points. Nice thing about mediums in general and relatively fast mediums in particular, like the 121, especially considering it over the 430U. 430U is a bit more plodding. Make a bit of an error here trying to mess around and get past this silly Progetto 54. A bit of a waste of time overall in the mid part of the game here. So my team is suffering a bit because I've only put 1,468 damage down. Now I'm just trying to figure out a way to get these, to get more hit points. I find the E75 though, use this guy as armor. There you go. Don't have to rely on my tank's armor. That's something you would do with a more soft tank like this that's softer than the 430U. Just take a blind shot there just in case it goes in. T54 Leopard, looks like most of their tanks are down here in the south. Didn't even need to get a shot on that guy. He explodes. And we'll head on in here and try to help the 705, the Pantera, STA, and the rest of them who are taking these guys on. They're all stuffed into a corner. It's going to give us an advantage. I prioritized the Leopard, which was a good idea, and then I take a little bit too long getting rid of him because the shots I have are on the FV. So instead of let the FV have multiple shots on me, and he actually hits me right there, little track action. The FV ends up putting a shot on me, I think, and the Leopard later. So Leopard's even lower. I would have really liked to have got in there and got rid of the Leopard, but watch this little sequence. We come in here. I'll just take that shot because I don't have to expose to the Leopard, and I'm thinking, now we're all good. STA is looking for a shot. We'll side scrape out. I got the FV, but I'm going to eat a shot from the Leopard. The Ram doesn't quite kill him, but we'll just go ahead and out reload this guy. Down he goes. Go grab another piece of armor. That is a dead tank, and we'll fight from behind it. Shot into the 257. And notice I was at 1,300 damage about mid-game, and now I'm up to 3,615. Nice mobility on this tank. We'll get up to 4,000. I finally kind of get into the battle end game there, so a little bit dodgy in the middle part on what I was doing. I was actually looking for the ram kill there, and then I got a little stuck. But once we got the damage starting to pour out, and then there's that DPM piece of the 121. It actually has some pretty darn good DPM between these two, especially here, and the mobility. All right, getting around map. Granted, a smaller map, so we end up dropping 4,371 assists and 4 kills. Let's jump over and take a quick look at a 430U battle. For the 430U, we're on Himmel's Glacier right here, spawned into the north, and we're going to head down to the Prahl Zone in the north, which I consider the critical terrain on this map. We'll win that area and then move to somewhere else typically don't push. I'm going to go the heavy area with this because this thing has pretty good armor. Now, I showed, this is top tier, all top tier, all tier 10. I showed you a top tier on the 121. So if I was to give you all the permutations of where you go and what you do with these two tanks in all the different situations of tiering, that would be a very long video with a lot of examples. So I'm just giving you these two examples right here. As a general rule then, the 121, a more mobile DPM kind of tank. This tank is nicely capable in heavy brawl zones. It is basically a medium heavy, a lot like a E50. Do you have to play it like that way? Absolutely not. You could go to medium places with this thing as well. It just is a little bit slower than I like to get to those kind of spots. What I really like about this tank is the surprising armor. As we discussed, especially the turret, if you can get hull down. And even the hull is pretty decent and can bounce some things. And you can be very annoying indeed, in heavy brawl zones with this tank with support. You don't want to go wading into a bunch of tanks and heavies alone or with only a couple friends. But look at the little train we got coming, my friends. All right, this is going to be very, very nice. I can tell right away. This poor 277 knows that the doom is coming. Punch a shot through there. 277s aren't particularly heavily armored, especially if you can get into the lower plate. And there's a bounce. So we get a bounce off of him. And we survive that shot. We don't eat the, 490 that thing would have done to us. And we get a little bounce. That time he does get it through our armor. A little overexposed. We'll back up again. We'll just get rid of this guy right in the lower plate. So decently accurate, even though it's less accurate than the 121, decently accurate in these short-range kinds of fights. The E100's here now, so we'll come out. I'm going to sneak a shot right up underneath his track. That's a little weak point there. Not easy to hit all the time, especially if they're wiggling around, but can be done. We're going to switch to heat, just in case I had to go through the turret of the E100 or make an attempt like that. Then I forget. I don't need it. Technically with the 140. There's that slightly long reload that you're waiting for. Timing can be thrown off if you're a medium player when you're playing a long reload tank like the 430U. Relatively long reload. So I thought I'd be ready to shoot that 140 and then the other tank had time to get in front of me. As I discussed, I am not going to push south onto their cap right now. Even though this is a romple stomp at 7-1. Technically I probably could with the amount of helpers I have coming across. But I'm going to swing around here just also as a matter of course or as a matter of practice, thinking about it. Don't push into their campers. All right? They don't have enough guns really to do much about it, and they're dying at a quick rate. What I really want to do is find the Progetto still in the middle here if I could. And I wanted to avoid getting blapped by the 268 and the Grill A, which are both up on the sniper hill. Surprised I didn't get lit. What we're going to find out is, and we'll speed this up, is that they've all fallen back into the very back. Now there's a miss right there on the run. There are many better mediums at shooting on the run like this. Many better than the 430U. Now we're looking for some lights. We got the 261. He dies just before I get the shot off. So we've got a grill up in the corner up here. You're about to find out where he is. There's the Progetto. The 268 version 4 is getting pushed by the glob of tanks that I was with. We're going to miss that shot again. Something you're going to have to deal with the 430U, especially on the snaps where you don't let it zoom in completely. It's actually pretty good when it's all zoomed in completely, as most tanks are, but I feel like the 121 just has better snap potential. It's got better dispersion. It makes sense. I have much better luck with the 121 on the run and gun. The 430U is somewhat indifferent to the run and gun kind of shots. So we'll push in here. I'll just show you another little sequence of trying to shoot this Progetto. The Grill A is going to hide behind the rock. The 50-51 goes in and dies. We're going to try to shoot. We hit this guy's upper plate. Yep, that's to be expected. Now we got to back out of this because if he comes around the corner with the rest of his shells, he could take me out of the game. But I also know that that glob of tanks is starting to threaten him. So he's not going to be able to just push around the corner at me. I probably backed up too long. I should have got back into it a little faster. There's a miss. I didn't let it completely zoom in, right? There's that snap issue that the 430U kind of has. I don't want to make too much of it, but I believe that the 121 makes more of those shots. That time it's better zoomed in. We get a shot on him right there. He's just about dead. They have finished up the 279 early that was on the other side of the map. I missed that shot. And I've got the hit points to give on the Grille, although it's a close one based on what happens here. We come up here, just get a shot on him, boom. Come on in, he moves his cannon over, hits me and lights me on fire. But the good thing is I had my automatic fire extinguisher on board. So 3,138, 651 assists on this game with 2 kills. And I think a pretty good example of some 430U gameplay where this tank can better run with the heavies if the situation presents itself and makes sense than really the 121 does. And it had plenty of mobility to get around this map, but it's just a little bit slower. It takes a little more time, a little more forward thought than the 121 does when you decide to get somewhere else. Let's go ahead and wrap this up, and I'll give you my opinion on which one is best. Well, all right, which one won? Well, let me throw a few more things in to muddy the water. Looking at the stats on these two tanks, the 430U and the 121, the global stats, or the all-time stats, have the 430U slightly in the lead. Both these tanks live in about the middle of the tier 10 mediums, to be quite honest, despite the popularity of the 430U. But remember that global stats, all the way back to when the tank came out, there's a lot of noise in that information. The game has changed, mechanics have changed, the tanks have changed. The other thing I wanted to throw out is the 121 was recently buffed, I think about a year ago, so it is better than it used to be. I think a lot of the hate on the tank is from the past, kind of legacy hate from when it was worse than it is. Which one wins? If you look at the 30-day stats, the 121 is actually outperforming on EU and RU the 430U. And again, there can be a lot of noise in those stats too. The 430U is a more popular line. There's probably a lot of more average players playing it. We can really get in there and parse through those stats quite a bit. So I'm not saying either one of those facts, the fact that the overalls are close or that the 121 is slightly in the lead on RU and EU. I don't mention NA because they don't have enough info on 121s to even list them for 30 days. Does any of that make one or the other better? You know what I'm going to say. I'm going to put my feet a little bit in both camps. I'm going to say it kind of depends on your play style. If you want a more mobile tank of this type of variety with decent armor, the 121 is probably up your alley with a bit better gun. If you want a more hardy tank, one that can take a hit or shrug off a hit is probably the better way to put it, and has some very superior hold down, here's my turret, you can't pen me kind of stuff, the 430U is going to be right up your alley. Even though they both play somewhat similarly, you are more mobile in the 121, more accurate, and you've got more armor in the 430U. If I was to just have to be pinned down and put into a corner and trapped and pick one which is better, I'm going to give the slight nod to the 430U because while it is a little slower and a bit derpier with the gun, it can basically do all of that stuff with a little bit of care, with a little bit of try hard, with some safe food, the right setup. You can really get the gun handling into something more comfortable than even I was running it with. And then it's also got that superior turret and hull armor. What do I like? Guido likes the 121. I don't know. Sometimes I just like to be contrary. It's more comfortable moving around. It's faster. It's got a better power to weight, so it gets moving better. It just seems to be more nimble, and it's got that slightly better gun that I like. And I think if you're talking about very good players, if they thought about it for a moment, they might start leaning towards the 121. But I would say for the average player, somebody who just wants a tank who's going to bounce some serious turret shots, that's still going to be mobile enough to get you around the battlefield but not get you in too much trouble, something that can be both a medium and hang with the heavies and be super annoying against the enemy tanks, the 430U is probably the tank for you. Plus, the line getting to the 432 is much better than the Chinese line getting to the 121. So there you go. Let me know what you guys think. Let's go ahead and click over and just give the 121 its nod as well. These two 3D styles, by the way, this is the icebreaker style for the 121, and then we've got the 430U 3D style Kevlar or Kevlar or something, I don't know, but if I was better at this I would know what the name of it is, but it's the two 3D styles, very cool. Let me know what you think down below. Which one is your favorite out of these two? Which one are you grinding for? Which one would you prioritize? And I think even more importantly, why? Why? Because you want more mobility and a better gun, or you just like the whole package with the armor on the 430U? That's all I've got for today. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Guido signing off. See ya.